The hook, the slave market, was loud, filled with voices shouting, bargaining, and laughing. Bright lamps burned above, throwing light on cages lined up in rows. Behind the metal bars, strange beings sat in silence. Some looked broken, some looked angry, and some looked too tired to even move. Among them was a young alien girl, no more than 20 in human years. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes large and glowing faintly in the dark. She had been raised as property, trained not to fight back. The traders called her a pleasure animal, a word that made her feel less than human, less than alive. The auctioneer shouted her name, though it was not really her name, just a tag given by her owners. He spoke of her beauty, her obedience, and her silence, telling the crowd she would bring joy to anyone who bought her. Laughter followed his words. To the men in the room, she was not a person. She was a thing. Then through the crowd, a man walked forward. He was human, middle-aged, with short gray hair and a heavy coat. His face carried deep scars, and his left arm was made of metal, glowing faintly at the joints. He did not smile, did not laugh like the others. His dark eyes studied her cage, quiet and serious. People in the crowd whispered his name, but the girl did not know it. All she saw was someone different from the others. He did not look hungry or cruel. He looked tired. The bidding started. Voices shouted numbers, credits flying higher and higher. Men competed, eager to own her. But the human with the metal arm stayed silent until the very end. When the last man shouted his price, the human raised his hand once. His voice was calm and low. He offered double. The crowd gasped. The auctioneer smiled wide and struck his hammer. The deal was made. The cage door opened with a loud click. Chains wrapped around her wrists and ankles. The traders pulled her forward and handed her over like a gift. She lowered her head, waiting for rough hands, for commands, for the treatment she always knew. But the man only touched the chain once, then unlocked it with a code. The cuffs fell to the floor. The traders looked confused. The girl looked confused. No one had ever freed her like this. "You are not property anymore," the man said, in a voice almost too soft for the noise of the market. "But you must stay with me for now. Do you understand?" She stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. Not property? No master had ever spoken those words. Her heart raced in fear. Was this a trick? Was he playing with her mind before hurting her later? She nodded slowly, but the fear stayed heavy inside her chest. They left the market together. The night air was cold, and the streets outside smelled of smoke and metal. Ships rose and landed in the distance, filling the sky with red light. The girl walked a step behind him, too scared to run, too unsure of his true plan. If she tried to escape, the slavers would catch her again. If she stayed, maybe the man would reveal his real purpose. Either way, she was trapped. The man led her to a small transport ship. Its body was old, its paint scratched, but it looked strong enough to fly. He opened the door and stepped inside without looking back. She hesitated for a moment, then followed. Inside, the ship was quiet, almost warm. There was food on the table, real food, not the dry powder she had been fed in the cages. There were blankets folded neatly on a chair. Everything felt strange, too clean, too normal for someone like her. "Sit," he said. His voice was not unkind, but it carried weight, the kind of voice used to giving orders. She obeyed, sitting on the edge of a seat. He placed a plate of food in front of her. Meat, bread, fruit, things she had seen but never tasted. Her stomach tightened, but her hands shook. She wanted to eat, but she was afraid it was a test. "Eat," he said again, softer this time. "No one will stop you." She picked up a piece of bread and bit into it. Warm, soft, real. Tears burned her eyes before she could stop them. She ate quickly, too quickly, as if someone would take it away. But the man said nothing. He only watched, silent and patient, like he was waiting for something. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. For a long moment, there was only the hum of the ship around them. Then he spoke again. "My name is Marcus," he said. "You do not need to tell me yours until you are ready. But I will not call you what they did. You are not an animal. You are free." The words hit her harder than any chain. She stared at him, her mind spinning. No one had ever spoken to her this way. No one had ever said she was free. Suspicion battled with hope inside her. Was this real, or was it another lie? Marcus stood and moved to the controls. The ship lifted from the ground, engines roaring. The city lights fell away beneath them, the stars opening wide above. The girl gripped the seat, her heart pounding. She was leaving the market, leaving the cages, leaving the life she had always known. But where was he taking her? Why had he chosen her? And why, out of everyone in the market, had he decided not to own her? But to free her? The answers would come later. For now, all she had was fear, hunger, and one terrifying question that echoed in her mind. What does he really want from me? Strange kindness. The small transport ship flew steady through the black sea of stars. Inside, silence filled the cabin. The girl sat on the seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her stomach was full for the first time in her life, but the fear had not left her. Every moment she waited for Marcus to show his true face. A master always revealed his cruelty sooner or later, but Marcus did not look at her. He sat at the controls, eyes on the stars, his scarred face lit by the soft glow of screens. His metal arm moved with a smooth rhythm, guiding the ship as if he had done this all his life. He said nothing. He asked nothing of her. The silence felt heavier than chains. Finally, after long minutes, Marcus spoke. His voice was calm, low, almost distant. "You can sleep in the back," he said. "There is a bed, clean sheets, no locks." She blinked. No one had ever offered her a bed. The cages had been her home. The cold floor had been her blanket. A bed with sheets sounded like a dream or a trap. She hesitated. He noticed. "You don't have to believe me," Marcus added, still watching the stars. "But you'll see it yourself. No tricks." The girl rose slowly, every movement careful, as if the floor might break under her feet. She walked down the short hall, peering into the small cabin at the back. And there it was, on a narrow bed, white sheets neatly folded, a pillow waiting. The room was simple, but to her eyes it looked like a palace. She touched the blanket, half expecting it to vanish. It stayed, soft, warm, real. Still, she did not lie down. Instead, she stood there, staring at the bed, then at the closed door. What did he want in return? Why give her comfort if he would demand something worse later? Her thoughts were interrupted when Marcus's voice came again from the cockpit. "You are safe here. Rest. No one will touch you." Her heart twisted. Safe. That word was dangerous. Hope was dangerous. Hope made people weak and weakness killed. She lay down anyway, but her eyes stayed open for hours, watching the ceiling, waiting for footsteps that never came. The next morning, the smell of food pulled her awake. She sat up quickly, heart racing, ready for danger. But there was no danger, and only Marcus standing at the table with 2 plates, eggs, bread, hot tea. "Eat," he said, placing 1 plate before her. She stared at the meal, then at him. Slowly, carefully, she ate. He did the same. No demands. No cruel laughter. No punishment. For 3 days, this pattern continued. He gave her food, space, and silence. He never touched her, never raised his voice. He treated her not like a slave, not like an animal, but almost like an equal. The longer it went on, the more it frightened her. Cruelty she understood. Kindness she did not. On the 4th day, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, broken from years of silence. "Why, he?" Marcus looked up from the controls. His dark eyes met hers. For a moment, he said nothing. Then slowly he answered, "Because you deserved better than what they called you." She frowned. The words felt strange. "But I am nothing. I was trained to obey." "No," he said, firm this time. "You are not nothing. They lied to you. They break people until they believe the lie. But I see something else." Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask what he saw, but the words stuck in her throat. That night she tested him. When Marcus slept in his chair, she crept toward the ship's exit. Her heart raced. Freedom was right there, just 1 button away. She could run, disappear into the stars, never see him again. Her hand hovered over the control, but then she froze. Why was there no lock? Why had he not chained her or sealed the doors? It would have been so easy for him to trap her. Behind her, his voice broke the silence. "If you want to leave, leave." She spun, eyes wide. He was awake, watching her quietly. "No anger, no threats. Go," Marcus said. "If you want. But if you stay, stay because it's your choice." Her chest shook with confusion. No master had ever spoken like this. Choice, freedom. These words did not belong to her world. She stepped back from the control, her hands trembling. She could have run. She could have taken the chance. But she did not. She returned to the small bed instead, unable to understand why. The days that followed were quieter, but something had changed. She no longer feared every step. She still doubted. Still wondered what game he played, but deep inside, a small part of her began to believe him. Marcus never pushed, never forced. He cooked, he flew the ship, and he sometimes sat in silence for hours. At night, he looked out at the stars with tired eyes, as if searching for something lost long ago. She noticed the way his scarred hand shook sometimes, the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was watching. For the first time, she wondered if he was broken too, and for the first time, she wondered if kindness could be real. The past revealed. The days turned into weeks. The ship moved from one quiet system to another, never staying long. To the girl, it felt like floating through a dream. No cages, no chains, no orders barked at her. Marcus gave her food, space, and silence. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he did not. It was strange, but slowly her body stopped waiting for the whip, yet her mind remained restless. She still did not know who Marcus really was. No man spent so much money only to give a slave her freedom. No man risked angering slavers without a reason. He carried secrets, and she felt them pressing in the air around him. At night, she watched him. He would sit by the control panel, staring at the stars as though searching for something beyond them. His metal arm rested on the table, glowing faintly in the dark. Once she caught him pulling off his coat. Underneath, his chest and back were lined with scars. Long burns, deep cuts, marks that told stories of war. She said nothing, but the image burned in her mind. Whoever Marcus was, he had survived things worse than cages. One evening, curiosity overcame fear. She sat across from him at the table, food untouched on her plate. "You fight before?" she said quietly. Marcus looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. For a long moment he did not answer. Finally he nodded. "Yes, I fought." She hesitated, then asked, "War?" His gaze drifted away, back to the stars. His voice was low when he spoke again. "Many wars. Too many. Some against men, some against things far worse." The girl's hands tightened around her cup. She had heard whispers in the cages, stories of humans who fought across the galaxy, soldiers who broke worlds. She never believed them fully. But now, looking at Marcus, she wondered if those whispers had been true. "Why stop?" she asked. For the first time, Marcus gave a bitter smile. "Because war stops nothing. It only takes." He lifted his metal arm and tapped it with his other hand. The sound rang hollow, cold. "This," he said, "is what war gave me. This, and ghosts that will never leave." The girl said nothing, but her eyes stayed on him. In that moment, she saw not only scars, but weight. A man carrying something heavy, something invisible. Later that night, she found herself whispering, almost without thinking. "Who did you lose?" Marcus turned his head slowly. His face was unreadable, but his eyes looked old, filled with shadows. "My wife," he said finally. His voice cracked on the word. "And my daughter." Silence wrapped the room. The girl's heart tightened. She lowered her gaze, ashamed for asking. But Marcus did not yell. He did not grow angry. He only leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as though remembering something long gone. "They were taken in a raid," he continued, his voice distant. "Slavers. Just like the ones who held you. I was off-world, fighting someone else's war. By the time I returned, it was too late." The girl's throat burned. She understood pain. She understood loss. But this was deeper. A family ripped away. A man left alone in a galaxy too cruel to care. Now she understood his silence, his tired eyes, his strange kindness. He had seen cages before. He had lost everything to them. The next day she noticed how people reacted when they landed on small colonies for supplies. Men and women recognized Marcus. They whispered his name with respect, some with fear. Children stared at his metal arm. Traders greeted him with a mix of caution and awe. One man bowed his head and muttered, "Commander Marcus." The girl froze. Commander. The word echoed in her head. Marcus had been a leader. Not just a soldier, a commander. A man who once gave orders to armies, but Marcus only shook his head at the title. "I'm no commander anymore," he said sharply. "That man is dead." The girl did not press, but she listened to the whispers. Stories of battles, of victories, of blood spilled across stars. The man who had freed her was not just anyone. He was a legend fallen into silence. That night she sat by the bed, hugging the blanket around her. Her mind spun. Marcus had bought her not for pleasure, not for cruelty, but because he could not walk past a cage again. His wife, his daughter, and stolen by the same cruelty. She felt her chest ache, not with fear, but with something else, pity, and a dangerous spark of understanding. Marcus, in his own way, began to teach her. Not with lectures, but with small things. He showed her how to read the ship's screens, how to press commands into the console. He gave her books, human history, simple words, old stories. At first she struggled. Letters danced, words twisted. But Marcus was patient. He never mocked her mistakes, never scolded her. When she finally read a full sentence aloud, his mouth curved in the faintest smile. "Well done," he said softly. The praise warmed her chest in a way she had never known. It frightened her too. No one had ever looked at her as someone who could learn, who could grow. She lay awake that night, thinking of his wife and daughter, of the scars on his body, of the way he treated her not as a slave but as a student, and slowly, painfully, a thought began to form in her mind. Maybe Marcus had not bought her to own her. Maybe, in his own broken way, he was trying to give back what the universe had stolen from him. Testing trust, the girl had begun to feel something she never expected. Safety. It was a fragile thing, thin as glass, but it was there. Each day with Marcus made her question the rules she had been taught all her life. Masters hurt, masters owned, masters broke you until nothing remained. Yet this man did none of those things, and that frightened her more than chains ever did, because kindness, she believed, was always a trick. One night, when the ship drifted quietly through space, she sat awake in her bed. The hum of the engine filled the silence. She stared at the door. Freedom was just beyond it if she dared. Her heart beat hard as she rose. Bare feet touched the cold floor. Step by step, she moved toward the cockpit where Marcus slept in his chair. His coat was wrapped around him, his face half-shadowed. The glow of the screens lit his scars. The door to the ship's exit stood just a few steps away. She pressed her hand against the control. Her pulse quickened. She could run. She could vanish into the colony outside. Maybe she would be caught again. Maybe worse, but at least she would not be waiting for a trap that never came. Her finger hovered over the button. "Do it," Marcus's voice said, calm and steady. She froze. He was awake, her eyes snapped toward him. He was watching her now, eyes dark but not angry. His voice was soft, almost too soft. "If you want to leave, go. No one will stop you." The words hit harder than any chain, she whispered, her throat dry. "Why?" Marcus sat up slowly, resting his metal arm on the chair's armrest. "Because freedom means choice," he said. "Not cages. Not fear, choice." Her hands shook. No master had ever spoken such words. She turned back to the door, but her body would not move. Something inside her screamed to run, but her feet carried her instead toward her bed. She sat down, trembling, unable to understand what had just happened. Marcus closed his eyes again. "Sleep," he said simply. The next day she could not stop thinking about it. She tested him in small ways. She refused food once, expecting anger. He only shrugged and said, "Then you'll be hungry." Later, when her stomach growled, he quietly placed a plate near her seat without a word. She dropped a cup on purpose, waiting for punishment. He only picked it up, fixed the pieces with his tools, and handed it back. She asked, sharp and cold, "Why not beat me?" Marcus looked at her then, a long silence before answering. "Because I don't break things I want to see heal." The words unsettled her. She did not know if they were kindness, pity, or something stranger. One evening, while Marcus worked on the ship's engine, she asked, "What if I attack you?" He did not even look up. "Then I will stop you. You kill me?" She pressed, testing him. "No," Marcus said, tightening a bolt. "I don't kill without reason, and you're not my enemy." She fell silent. No enemy, not property. What was she then? That night she tried again. When Marcus slept, she walked to the control room and pressed buttons she did not understand. The ship beeped, lights flashing warnings. Panic rushed through her chest. She had broken something, maybe even doomed them both. Marcus woke instantly, rushing forward. For the first time, his voice was sharp. "What are you doing?" Fear gripped her. She expected a strike, a chain, a whip. She backed against the wall, whispering, I wanted to see if you would stop me." His face hardened. For a long moment, she thought she had gone too far. But then Marcus let out a long breath, shoulders relaxing. "I'm not your jailer," he said quietly. "If you want to test me, fine. But don't destroy the ship we both need to survive." Shame burned her face. She sank to the floor, covering her face with trembling hands. For the first time, tears came not from pain but from confusion. Why was he like this? Why did he not act like the others? Marcus crouched in front of her. His metal arm rested on his knee, the glow faint in the dark. His voice was calm again. "You don't trust me. I understand. Maybe you never will, but I won't stop treating you as more than what they made you." She lowered her hands, eyes wet, searching his face. His scars, his tired eyes, his strange patience, and it all made no sense. But in that moment, for the first time, she believed him. Not fully, not completely, but enough for a single thought to rise inside her. Maybe this man truly was different. The following day, she chose to sit beside him at the cockpit instead of staying hidden in her room. She watched the stars with him in silence. Marcus said nothing, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch in the faintest smile. He did not need her trust yet. He only needed her to try, and slowly, against all fear and reason, she began to. The bond grows. The silence between them began to change. At first it had been sharp, heavy, the silence of fear and mistrust. But slowly, piece by piece, it became something softer. The girl no longer hid in the small cabin all day. She sat beside Marcus at the cockpit, watching the stars pass by in endless rivers of light. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't, but even silence with him no longer felt like chains. It felt almost safe. Marcus began to teach her things, not as a master, not as an owner, but as a patient guide. He showed her how to read the glowing letters on the ship's screen. At first, the symbols danced in her eyes, meaningless and confusing. She grew frustrated, afraid she would anger him with her mistakes. But Marcus never shouted. He corrected her gently, repeating the same lesson as many times as needed. One evening, she finally managed to read a full sentence aloud from a small book he had given her. Her voice shook, but the words came clear. Marcus nodded once, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "Well done," he said softly. Those two words lit something inside her chest. Small, fragile, but warm. Praise. Not for obedience, not for silence, but for learning. For trying. She began to share things too. Not much at first, in those small fragments, broken pieces of memories she had buried deep. She told him about her people, a race with glowing eyes and soft, pale skin, who once lived free on green worlds. She told him about songs they used to sing, though her own voice cracked when she tried to hum them. Marcus listened. He never interrupted, never told her to stop. When she fell silent, embarrassed by her own words, he only said, "You should keep those songs. They are yours no matter what they tried to take." The idea struck her like lightning. Hers. Something that belonged to her. She had not thought in such words for years. One night, while they shared a simple meal, she asked a question that had been haunting her. "Why me?" she whispered. Marcus set down his fork. His eyes darkened with thought. "I told you. Because you deserved better. But why not someone else? There were others in cages, too. Why choose me?" He looked at her then, long and steady, as though weighing his words. "Because when I saw you," he said finally, "you looked the way I once felt. Alone. Broken. Waiting for someone who never came." Her chest tightened. She looked away, but the words stayed inside her like a seed. The bond grew in quiet ways. She began to laugh, softly at first, when Marcus made dry remarks about stubborn machines or faulty trade stations. He was not a man of humor, but when her laugh slipped out, his eyes softened. She began to trust her hands with tools, repairing small things on the ship under his guidance. The pride she felt when she fixed a loose wire or replaced a panel was new, strange, addictive. And sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, she studied him. The scars across his face, the tired lines around his eyes, the strength in his mechanical arm. She saw not just a soldier, not just a man who had lost too much, but someone who carried the weight of surviving. She began to wonder if, in some way, they were the same. But shadows lingered. At night, she dreamed of cages and cold hands. She woke sweating, shaking, afraid the kindness around her was just another illusion. Marcus never asked about the dreams, but once when she woke crying, she found a blanket already waiting at her side, placed quietly without a word. Another night, she heard him speaking in his sleep, a woman's name, a child's laugh. His voice broke on the sound. She realized then that Marcus carried nightmares too, ghosts of his wife and daughter that never left him. For the first time, she felt not just pity, but a strange closeness. Two broken souls, stitched together by pain neither had chosen. One evening, as the stars stretched across the glass, she dared to speak the thought that had been growing inside her. "You treat me." "Not like a slave," she said. "Not like property, why?" Marcus did not answer at once. He sat with his hands folded, staring at the endless dark outside. When he finally spoke, his words were quiet. "Because I refused to be the monster that took my family. I swore never again to stand by while someone is caged." The girl's throat tightened. She wanted to reply, but the words would not come. Instead, she only nodded, holding the truth close inside her. The bond was still fragile. Trust did not grow overnight, but it was there now, alive between them, like a flame trembling against the wind. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew this bond was changing everything. For Marcus, it was a step away from the shadows of loss. For her, it was the first taste of a life that could be her own. And for both of them, it was the beginning of something neither fully understood, but both feared to lose. The turning point. The girl thought she was beginning to understand safety. The days of silence and fear were slowly being replaced with something gentler. She ate without waiting for punishment. She read words on glowing screens. She even laughed once, and Marcus had not mocked her. For the first time in her life, the future did not look like a cage, but safety, she learned, was fragile. It could vanish in a single moment. They were docked at a quiet trading station orbiting a small moon. Marcus was negotiating for fuel while she walked carefully behind him, eyes lowered, hood pulled over her face. She had grown used to being invisible, but whispers followed them anyway. "Is that her?" someone muttered. "That's the one he bought," another hissed. "He freed her, they say. Foolish man." She kept her head down, clutching the edge of Marcus's coat. The stares burned like fire. And then she heard a voice that froze her blood. "Well, well, look who it is," she turned slowly. Standing by the supply crates were two men with cruel smiles and hard eyes. The slavers. The same ones who had sold her in the market. Their eyes glittered with greed as they spotted her. "That's our property," one sneered. "Hand her back, Commander." Marcus straightened, his scarred face calm, his metal arm gleaming in the station's light. "She is not your property," he said. His voice carried like steel across the hall. The slavers laughed. "You think you can just buy her freedom? She's worth a fortune. We'll take her back, and we'll take you too, old man." Other traders began to back away, clearing space. The air grew heavy with the promise of violence. The girl's hands shook. She wanted to run, to hide, but her feet stayed rooted beside Marcus. He glanced at her once, then stepped forward. "You'll take nothing," he said. The fight came fast. One slaver drew a blade, the other raised a shock whip. Marcus moved with the speed of a soldier, his metal arm flashing as it blocked the whip's strike. Sparks flew. He twisted, grabbing the man's wrist, and slammed him hard against the wall. The second slaver lunged at the girl. She stumbled back, heart racing, but Marcus was already there. His fist, half flesh, half machine, drove into the slaver's chest, sending him sprawling across the floor. The hall filled with shouts. More slavers appeared, weapons drawn. Traders ducked for cover. The girl pressed against the wall, trembling as Marcus stood tall in the center, scars lit by the harsh light. "Stay behind me," he said without looking back. And for the first time, she obeyed not out of fear, but out of choice. The fight raged. Marcus fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. His metal arm crushed weapons. His body moved with the memory of countless battles. But there were too many. For every slaver he knocked down, two more came forward. The girl's chest tightened. She could not watch him fall. She searched the floor desperately and found a dropped knife. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She was no warrior, no fighter, but she could not stand still. One slaver lunged from behind Marcus, blade raised. The girl screamed and stabbed blindly. The knife struck the man's arm, making him howl in pain and drop his weapon. He turned toward her, rage burning in his eyes. Before he could strike, Marcus's metal fist smashed into his jaw, dropping him cold. Marcus looked at her, breath ragged, and for a moment their eyes met. She was no longer the girl from the cage. She had chosen to fight. The slavers finally retreated, dragging their wounded with them, spitting threats as they fled. "This isn't over," one shouted. "She belongs to us. We'll come back." The hall was silent after they left. Traders peeked out from behind crates, staring at Marcus and the girl with a mixture of awe and fear. Marcus stood still, chest rising and falling, his scars bright with sweat. His coat was torn, his face bleeding, but he did not fall. The girl ran to him, dropping the knife, grabbing his arm. "You're hurt," she whispered. Her voice shook, but it was not fear this time. It was something else, uncare. Marcus looked down at her. For the first time, his tired eyes softened. "You saved me," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, you saved me." Back on the ship, Marcus cleaned his wounds in silence. The girl watched him, still trembling from the fight. Her mind replayed the moment she had held the knife, the moment she had chosen to fight for him. Something had changed inside her. She had been a slave all her life, taught to obey, to stay silent, to never lift a hand. But tonight she had chosen. Not to run, not to hide, but to stand beside him. When Marcus finally sat down, exhausted, she knelt before him. Her glowing eyes lifted to his. "Why risk your life for me?" she asked. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Because no one risked theirs for my family. I won't make that mistake again." Tears burned her eyes. She reached out, hesitated, then touched his scarred hand. For a moment neither spoke. The bond between them was no longer just quiet kindness. It had been sealed in blood and danger, and in her heart she knew. She was no longer only his burden. She was his choice. The resolution. The ship was quiet after the fight, but the silence felt different now. It was not the silence of fear or the silence of mistrust. It was heavy with something new, a bond forged in danger, sharpened by choice. The girl sat at the small table, fingers still trembling as she held a cup of tea Marcus had made for her. The taste was bitter but warm. Across from her, Marcus leaned back, bandages wrapped around his arm and shoulder. His face looked tired, older than before, but his eyes held a strange light she had never seen in him. For the first time, she was not afraid of what came next. And that frightened her even more. That night she lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling of the small cabin. Her thoughts twisted like knots. She had fought beside him. She had seen him bleed for her. She had seen him stand against men who wanted to drag her back into the darkness. Why? Why would a man risk his life for someone like her? She had been told all her life that she was nothing, that she was a thing, that no one would ever choose her except to own her. Yet Marcus had chosen differently, again and again. The questions burned so bright that she could not stay still. Quietly she rose and walked to the cockpit. Marcus sat there as always, watching the stars. His coat rested on his shoulders, his scars lit faintly by the glow of the screens. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, then whispered, "Marcus?" He turned, his eyes steady. "You can't sleep?" "No," she admitted. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I don't understand you." Marcus tilted his head. "What don't you understand?" "Why me?" she asked. "Why buy me? Why fight for me? Why risk everything? For someone like me?" Marcus was silent for a long time. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the console, staring at the stars. Finally he spoke. "Because I lost everything once. My wife, my daughter. I could not save them. Slavers took them, and I was too far away to stop it. I swore I would never let it happen again." His voice was low, heavy, filled with grief. He looked at her then, and his eyes were not the eyes of a soldier, but of a man carrying ghosts. "When I saw you in that cage," he said, "I saw them. I saw the same fear in your eyes. And I knew. I could not walk away." The girl's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Marcus stood slowly. He walked to her, close enough that she could see the scars etched across his skin. His metal arm gleamed faintly as he reached out, but he did not touch her. Instead, he said, "I bought you to give you freedom, but freedom without choice is nothing. So now I will ask." Her heart raced. She lifted her eyes to him. "Will you stay?" Marcus asked. His voice was steady but soft. "Not as property. Not as a slave. Not as someone I saved, but as my wife." The words struck her harder than any chain ever had. Wife, equal, chosen. Her mind spun. She thought of the cages, of the slavers' cruel laughter, of the endless nights where she had prayed only for the pain to end. She thought of Marcus feeding her, teaching her, standing in front of her when blades were drawn. She thought of his scars, his ghosts, his broken heart, and she thought of herself, no longer a thing, no longer silent. She had picked up a knife. She had made a choice. Her hand shook, but her voice came clear. Yes, she whispered. I will stay. For the first time, Marcus let out a breath like a man who had carried a mountain on his back. His shoulders eased and his eyes softened. Then it's decided, he said. He reached out again, and this time she placed her hand in his, not out of fear, not out of obedience, but out of choice. Flesh and metal, scar and skin, broken pieces coming together. The days that followed were different. She no longer sat behind him like a shadow. She walked beside him, her hood lowered, her glowing eyes no longer hidden. People stared, whispered, but she no longer cared. Marcus introduced her not as property, but as his partner. His wife, the word felt strange, powerful, dangerous. But it was hers now. At night, when the stars spread endless outside the cockpit window, they sat together in silence that no longer felt heavy. He taught her how to fly the ship. She read aloud from books, her voice growing steadier each time. Slowly, they began to build something neither thought possible. But the galaxy was not done with them. The slavers had not forgotten. Whispers of their threats followed them across stations. Traders warned of bounties placed on Marcus's head, of hunters searching for the girl. Danger still lingered, waiting. Yet for the first time, she did not tremble at the thought, because she was not alone anymore. And as the ship drifted onward through the sea of stars, two broken lives carried forward together, scarred, fragile, but bound by something stronger than fear. Not master and slave, not owner and property, husband and wife. And somewhere in the silence between the stars, a new story had begun.